The studio lights turned on like searchlights, bright, hot, every corner of the Meet the Press stage lit up under their glare. Behind the glass panels, Washington, D.C.'s skyline shimmered, but inside the studio, something colder moved in the quint air, cameras rolled, microphones hissed to life. Every person on set knew this was no regular broadcast. Kristen Welker sat tall, dressed in a dark navy suit, earpiece tight in her ear, hands clasped. She had interviewed presidents, had grilled generals. But today, something felt different. Her breath was calm, but her heart pounded. She was about to face Karoline Leavitt, the youngest former White House press secretary in history, just 27, loyal to Trump, sharp as a blade. And for weeks now, trending everywhere. The control room buzzed behind the glass. Producers whispered. Camera directors counted down, but one voice stuck in Kristen's head. She might drop something no one's ready for. That warning had come from an internal NBC staffer 2 days ago. A whistleblower, someone who had seen what Leavitt might say. The phrase was strange but unforgettable. Echo protocol. No one knew what it meant. But it had left everyone on edge. 30 seconds. The floor manager called. Karoline stepped onto the stage like a performer walking into fire. Blonde hair, tight in a bun, black blazer, confident stride. No notes, no teleprompter. Just her voice and something hidden behind her eyes, like she was waiting to surprise everyone. Kristen nodded politely. Karoline, thank you for joining us. It's an honor, Kristen. The interview began the usual way. Background, politics, the 2024 elections, the Trump factor. Karoline responded like a practiced, soldier-disciplined, clever, never caught off guard. She turned tough questions into slogans, framed criticisms as victories. Kristen tried to push harder, but you stood at that podium when the election lies were spreading. You defended what turned out to be falsehoods, Kristen said. Karoline leaned forward. Calm, you say they were lies. But whose truth were we defending? The media's. The intelligence agencies. Or the people's. Kristen blinked. The audience at home likely leaned closer. Karoline continued. In 2020, something bigger happened. Bigger than Trump, bigger than Biden. A decision was made not by voters, but by people who never appear on screens like this. Kristen frowned. What decision are you talking about? Karoline smiled. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Operation Echo Protocol. Silence. The producers in the control room stood up. Kristen tried to maintain her journalistic calm. I'm not familiar with that name. Oh, I believe you are, Karoline said. In fact, you saw the file, or at least you were told not to. That's the real reason I'm here today. Kristen's earpiece crackled. Change topic. Move on now. But Kristen didn't look away. You're accusing NBC of hiding something. I'm accusing an alliance, Karoline said, voice clear, slow, between certain media executives and security officials. In 2020, when information about foreign interference, surveillance, and press manipulation leaked, they buried it. And some of those documents were labeled Echo Protocol. You buried it. Kristen paused. This wasn't part of any script. Not in pre-interviews. Not in the run-through. She'd been warned, but this was bigger than expected. Leavitt reached into her blazer and pulled out a small black USB stick. She held it up between two fingers like it was a knife. This drive contains a copy of one of the original documents. The full file drops in 1 hour on a secure server. Public domain. It's free for the world. Producers waved frantically behind. The camera's security guards shifted. The lights suddenly seemed hotter. Kristen whispered, "You're risking everything." Why? Karoline didn't hesitate. Because the truth doesn't belong to governments. It belongs to people. And I don't trust your studio to tell them. Kristen sat frozen. Training told her to take control, recenter the interview, pivot. But the words wouldn't come. Leavitt placed the USB on the table between them, quietly, like setting down evidence in a courtroom. "I hope you air this," she said, standing up. "But I don't expect you to." She walked off the stage. The lights were still rolling, the cameras still on. Kristen stared at the little black drive. Her hand moved toward it, then stopped. The broadcast cut abruptly to commercials. But bye. Then the damage was done. Social media exploded. Viewers scrambled for answers. Newsrooms across the world replayed the clip. Everyone had one question: what is Echo Protocol? And somewhere, deep inside NBC headquarters, a different kind of panic began. Because Karoline Leavitt was right. The file was real, and someone, years ago, had made sure no one ever saw it. Until now. The file wasn't supposed to exist anymore. 40-8 hours before the broadcast. Deep inside NBC's Washington archive wing, a windowless floor, rarely visited at, junior intern named Riley Jacobs sifted through dusty tapes. He had been assigned a boring project: digitize old political footage from 2020. It was grunt work, the kind most interns hated. But Riley didn't mind. He liked history. He liked secrets even more. The tape that changed everything wasn't labeled clearly. Just a thin sticker on an old hard drive, echo_2020.mp4. He almost skipped it, but something about the name made him pause. He plugged it into his laptop. For the first 5 seconds, it showed a static room, dimly lit. No sound. Then voices low, tense, urgent. The video showed 5 people seated around a small table. Riley instantly recognized 2 of them. One was Neil Garland, now chief of staff to the current president. The other was Rebecca Mills, former deputy director of national intelligence. The date on the corner read December 4th, 2020. As the clip played, Riley's eyes widened. The officials discussed a strategy to quietly limit a massive leak. Coming from international journalists working with U.S. intelligence contractors. A surveillance program had gone rogue, spying not just on foreign enemies, but on allies, diplomats, reporters, even elected officials. They used the term Echo Protocol to describe the media cooperation plan. Discredit the leak, plant counter-narratives, and ensure major outlets like NBC, The Post, and CNN didn't report on it. One line stood out clearly: we shape the story, or it shapes us. Riley's stomach turned. He knew he shouldn't have seen it. He also knew he had just discovered something very, very dangerous. He copied the video onto a personal flash drive. Then, pretending like nothing happened, he handed the original drive to the lead producer, Julia Marks. He watched her face go pale when she saw the file name. 5 minutes later, she called someone. Riley heard one name: Garland. Within the hour, the file was gone from NBC's servers. But it wasn't gone from Riley's. Across the city, Karoline Leavitt was on her phone in a private suite. She wasn't surprised when her encrypted inbox pinged. Subject line: ECH Owen buried. No text, just a link. She downloaded it, watched twice. It confirmed what she already knew. Her years inside the Trump White House had shown her shadows behind curtains, but never this clear. She had always suspected there was a coordinated information operation involving U.S. media and intelligence, but now she had proof. She sent a reply: trust no one. Drop in 48 hours, live. Then she packed a bag and booked a quiet hotel under a fake name. She knew her next steps would make her a target from all sides. Back at NBC, executive offices lit up late into the night. Julia Marks met with legal advisors. If this leaks, she said, it's not just us. The entire post-2020 narrative crumbles. Elections, public trust, everything. Someone suggested preemptive damage control. Another person suggested reaching out to federal contacts, quiet ones, but none of it mattered, because 20 miles away, Riley uploaded the video, heavily encrypted, to a European data sharing site used by whistleblowers. He didn't reveal his identity. He didn't post it publicly, not yet. But it was there, ready. And someone else had access to it now. Al Jazeera's investigations. Keem in Berlin. They had been hunting a story about US interference in Middle Eastern press freedom. Echo Protocol had been whispered about before. Now they had evidence. Emails began flying across continents. Journalists from France, Turkey, India, and the UK began fact-checking names and locations from the video. And they all realized something chilling. One of the journalists mentioned in the video. Nihan Jidemir was murdered in Istanbul in 2021. The US had called it a local robbery gone wrong. Now it looked like something else entirely. The morning of the interview, Karoline didn't sleep. She stood by the hotel window. Watching dawn break over DC below her, she saw a black SUV parked too long, same one from the night before. Unmarked plates. She pulled the USB drive from her coat pocket and stared at it. She could have leaked it anonymously. Let the journalists do their job. But that wasn't the point. She needed the world to see her face when the truth came out. She wanted it to be undeniable, unforgettable. She wanted the establishment to watch her speak the words on their own turf on national television. At the table they thought they controlled, her phone buzzed. A simple text from an unknown number. "They're going to cut the feed, be precise." She smiled. Back in the NBC studio, minutes before going live, Kristen Welker reviewed her notes. Her producer handed her a small rewrite. "Be ready to pivot if she starts ranting," she said. "Don't let her steer." Kristen nodded. But a flicker of doubt passed through her. She had heard rumors too. Whispers of an old tape. A file that had once been flagged as national security priority and then disappeared. Now, Kit was back. She looked into the mirror, adjusting her microphone. The moment Karoline Leavitt walked off the Meet the Press stage, viewers around the world exploded into a frenzy. Clips from the broadcast went viral within minutes. Hashtags flooded every platform. Hashtag Echo Protocol. Hashtag Leavitt Drop. Hashtag Media Cover-Up Most. People didn't understand what they had just seen. A cryptic interview, a USB stick, a strange phrase, you buried it. But a few people, especially journalists, understood too well. Within the hour, the video file Karoline hinted at went live on a secure mirror server based in Slovenia. It was untraceable, public, raw. The file was 9 minutes long. It showed intelligence officials, media executives, and classified memos. Some real, others redacted. Voice recordings confirmed coordination between a few high-level U.S. security agents and producers at several major media outlets. The goal: control the fallout of a surveillance program gone wrong, to kill a story before it reached the public. The leak didn't mention names directly, but timelines and keywords were clear enough. The words foreign press containment, election optics, and post-truth media leverage stood out like neon signs. One name repeated 3 times, Nihan Jidemir, in Istanbul, where Nihan had been killed 3 years earlier. Her former editor sat staring at his screen. He read the file, then read it again. The line was short but devastating. Subject: Jidemir believed to have retained evidence. Exposed: activate local protocol. She had been investigating U.S. military activity near the Syrian border and its media blackouts when she was found dead in a back alley. Turkey called it a random attack. The U.S. said nothing now. The world knew something darker in Berlin. At Al Jazeera's investigative desk, editor Thomas Reeve took a phone call. The caller, a source in NATO's security division, warned him, "Prepare for pressure. They'll deny everything, but you're not the only one following the trail." Thomas asked, "How big is this?" The answer came quietly. "This is not just a media scandal. This could break alliances." Al Jazeera released a report within 2 hours. It went global. The title read, Leaked U.S. Intelligence Plan Targets Journalists, Foreign Alizeko Protocol Confirmed. BBC and Reuters followed within minutes. European Parliament members demanded a formal inquiry. Journalists in Brussels staged a protest. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation pulled a segment they had scheduled on media transparency and replaced it with a full hour. Echo Protocol Special. In Washington, D.C., the White House issued a statement calling the file disinformation. But within internal channels, panic was already spreading. Chief of Staff Neil Garland ordered a closed-door meeting. No phones, no transcripts. Just silence, instructions, and urgent calls to old contacts in the intelligence community. Garland knew what the tape meant. He had been there in the room when it was recorded. He had helped draft the counter-narrative strategy. He also knew it was only a matter of time before someone pointed directly at him. Meanwhile, Kristen Welker was gone. NBC released a public statement that she was recovering from a medical emergency. But the truth was, she had boarded a private plane to Geneva under an alias Krista Wallace. With her was a single encrypted drive, labeled by hand, Jalali Archive 36. The man she was about to meet was Amir Jalali, a former data analyst at the CIA's Foreign Program Unit. He had vanished 2 years ago after leaking reports to Amnesty International. Many believed he was dead. He WASN single quotes to Kristen reached the hotel in Geneva late. Jalali was already in the room, wearing gloves, the curtains drawn. He didn't shake. Hands, I assume you've seen the broadcast, she said. He nodded. She's brave or stupid. Kristen opened her laptop. I need to know what you have. I need the full echo file. Jalali raised an eyebrow. It's not just one file, it's a system, a machine. The leaked video, they only saw the head of the snake. Then, show me the body. He inserted a drive into her computer and entered a 26-character password. Dozens of folders appeared: maps, voice logs, secure email transcripts, even PowerPoint slides with agency letterheads. But one document Kristen couldn't stop staring at was labeled Operation Backwash Foreign. Press Neutralization Timeline. She clicked it. A list appeared: names, dates, locations. Some were just marked with red lines, but others she gasped. Nihan, Jidamir, Emil, Saidi, Carla, Jameson. Every single one had died mysteriously in the last 4 years. They were journalists. Kristen whispered. They were messengers, Jalali said. And the system feared the message. Kristen turned to him. Why are you showing me this now? He smiled sadly. Because the world might listen now, for once. But someone else was already listening. Back in Geneva, across the street. From their hotel, a man watched their meeting through a long lens. His phone buzzed once. A short message appeared. Confirmed. Jalali alive. Upload in progress. Authorization pending. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just picked up a second phone and pressed record, because this story wasn't going to die in the dark. This time, it was already breaking through the surface, and the whole world was about to choke on the truth. Every phone had been confiscated. No cameras, no press, just 12 people around a polished walnut table. On the screen at the end of the room, a paused frame showed Karoline Leavitt holding up the USB drive from the Meet the Press interview. The moment had gone viral. But inside this room, no one was interested in likes or views. They were thinking about control. Neil Garland stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight. His voice cut through the room like a scalpel. This is no longer a media story. This is a national security breach. And if we don't contain it within the next 48 hours, we're going to lose narrative authority, not just here globally. Across the table, CIA liaison Marta Greaves adjusted her glasses. We knew Echo was a long shot in 2020. It was supposed to buy time, contain fallout. But this was not part of the plan. We buried it, Garland replied. Or we thought we did, an advisor whispered. If Jalali has the rest of the files, Garland raised a hand. We don't say his name aloud. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who Amir Jalali was. It's a ghost, a defector. And now, a problem resurfaced from the dead. Back in Geneva, Kristen Welker sat in the hotel suite with Amir Jalali, face lit only by the glow of the laptop screen. File named Backwash Timeline scrolled slowly. This wasn't just media manipulation, she said, her voice low. This was assassination coordination. Suppression by design. Jalali nodded. Echo was the public cover. Backwash was the actual weapon. Kristen's hands trembled as she took notes. A global operation, state-funded, using predictive surveillance. Data to silence dissent. Reporters, whistleblowers, even minor. Political figures with potential to disrupt the U.S. narrative abroad. She looked up. How many people knew about this? Fewer than 20, Jalali said. And most of them still sit in power. Why now? Kristen asked. Why leak this now? Jalali looked out the window toward the Alps. Because someone finally said it out loud on live television. Karoline Leavitt cracked the silence. Kristen stared at her notes. The story was radioactive. If she published this, it would destroy careers. Maybe governments? And it would put a target on her back. Again, you'll need a platform that can't be compromised, Jalali said. Not NBC, not any U.S. outlet. I know just the place, she whispered, at a small press center in Brussels. An independent network called Nova 24 had just received a strange encrypted message. It included the first 6 documents from Jalali's archive, along with Kristen's contact information and a short note. If I disappear, publish everything. KW Nova 24 was small but fearless. Funded by cross-European donations, it had broken several corruption stories in the past. Now, their editor, Irana Kovac, read through the material, growing more pale by the minute. Is this real? Her assistant asked. Too real, Irana whispered. Get our legal team, then call the Dutch Parliament. We're going wide. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt was already on the move. She had gone dark since the NBC interview, no public appearances, no statements. But she wasn't hiding. She was preparing. Her team had booked a press event in New Hampshire under the cover of a campaign. Fundraiser. What no one knew was that the actual guest list included only 5 people. 3 journalists from non-use outlets, 1 cyber analyst, and a former intelligence handler turned whistleblower. Inside a small, windowless room at the back of a town hall, Karoline dropped her voice. The next drop will prove direct communication between Garland's office and international ops. They approved neutralizations. I want that in your lead paragraph. A German journalist interrupted. If you go public again, they will paint you as a traitor. Karoline leaned forward. Let them. I'd rather be called a traitor by liars than stay quiet like a coward. One of the reporters pressed. Are you coordinating with Kristen Welker? No, Karoline said truthfully. But we're speaking the same language now. Inside the Pentagon, a different conversation was happening. Colonel James Steele had been called in to a classified meeting with Intelligence Command. He was a veteran of gray operations that didn't exist on record. The leaks. Expanding, one official said. And we have strong intel that Jalali is with Welker. Steele asked the question no one wanted to answer. Do we greenlight silencing? A long pause, then a nod. We don't care about the journalist. Jalali cannot walk into a courtroom, not with what he knows. Kristen sensed it was coming. She had felt this kind of fear before after. Kristen and Jalali's car tore through the Italian border under a veil of early dawn fog. The man trailing them off the books, asset from a U.S. defense contractor, was pulled back by a quiet message sent from inside the tour. White House, hold, surveillance only. Leak spreading too fast. We need a new strategy. Back in D.C., Neil Garland stood alone in the Oval Office. The president wasn't present. This was above even him now. Garland stared at the wall-mounted TV where Karoline Leavitt's meet. The press interview was being replayed on loop by foreign media. He muted it. His phone, VIBRATED, unknown contact. Leak has reached Moscow. RT preparing coverage. Unknown contact. China state media preparing response. You've lost narrative control. Garland closed his eyes. The system was unraveling. And this time, it wasn't because of foreign interference. It was because of truth spoken domestically and made undeniable globally at the same time. Karoline stood at a podium in a nondescript community center in Concord, New Hampshire. Outside, there were no campaign banners, no press vans, just 3 hybrid sedans and a few quiet security officers pretending to be local police. She looked down at her note cards. She didn't need them. In the audience sat 2 correspondents from Der Spiegel and The Hindu, and a representative from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. No mainstream U.S. outlet had been invited. Karoline stepped up, cleared her throat, and began. I was 24 when I first walked into the West Wing. I believed in the power of words. I thought politics was about arguments. But what I've learned, what we're all learnings, that truth doesn't die in debates. It dies in silence. Carefully arranged, deliberately managed silence. She pulled out a printout. This memo cleared by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence proved. Language for Us Media Stories in December 2020. It contains terms like strategic misinformation compliance, editorial calibration, and audience exposure mitigation. She held up another page. This one confirms communications between Neil Garland's office and international media blacklists. Dozens of journalists flagged. At least 9 killed. The reporters didn't move, didn't blink. They recorded everything. Karoline locked eyes with one of them and said, "You need to understand something. This isn't about left or right. It's not about Trump or Biden or foreign governments. It's about a machine, one that exists above them. And it's terrified of daylight." Meanwhile, Kristen and Jalali had reached Milan, in a quiet apartment above a bookstore. They set up a secure satellite connection. NOVA24 had already published phase 1 of the leak, and now they needed more. Do we give them everything? Kristen asked. Jalali hesitated. Not yet. It's one piece still missing. Something they left out of Echo. He opened a file named harlow-final.mov. The screen showed an off-record interview from 2021 with a man in shadow. His voice was distorted, but the transcript running beneath identified him. Thomas Harlow, former media advisor to the National Security Council. Harlow spoke slowly. We tested Echo domestically first. We used it on small markets, online newsrooms in Idaho, Oregon, parts of Florida. We planted false reports. Then we watched who flagged them. That's how we built the dissent map. Every journalist who pushed back went on a list. Some got calls, some got offers. The rest disappeared into irrelevance. Kristen froze. The dissent map. She had heard whispers about ITAN internal. Government algorithm used to predict which voices would become dangerous, disruptive. It was thought to be conspiracy theory nonsense. But here it was, real, a digital kill list for truth. That same day, the U.S. Senate was forced to hold a closed-door session after a coalition of independent lawmakers demanded hearings on strategic media interference and journalistic risk mapping. But Garland had already begun phase 2 of containment. He didn't need to deny anymore. Now, he needed fear. That night, 2 journalists who had posted the second batch of Echo files on a French data mirror were detained at Charles de Gaulle Airport under terror suspicion. Another, a Canadian reporter named Myanna Hart, was found unconscious in her Montreal apartment. Local police called it fainting from stress, but her laptop had been wiped. Kristen received the encrypted alert from the consortium's network. Red protocols initiated. Journalists being flagged in 5 countries. Request for relocation assistance. She looked at Jalali. It's starting, she whispered. No, he said grimly. It already started. We're just finally seeing it. In New York, the young podcast host, known only as Max Vox, uploaded the first fully narrated Echo Protocol EXPLAINER. It included clipped segments from Kristen's notes, Clali's interviews, Karoline's speech, Clali's speech and data visualization of the descent map. It used language anyone could understand. It had urgency, style, and fury. In 3 hours, it hit 20 million views, and 5. It was banned on YouTube. In 6, it was reposted on hundreds of mirror sites. People weren't waiting for permission anymore. In the shadows, Garland made one last move. A sealed indictment was issued for Karoline Leavitt. The charge: unlawful possession and distribution of classified material. Kristen saw the headline. She didn't hesitate. She turned on her camera, looked straight into the lens, and began her own live feed. This is Kristen Welker. I'm no longer with NBC. I'm speaking directly to the public. What you've heard about Echo Protocol is only the beginning. And if they arrest Karoline Leavitt, know this, it's because she told the truth first, and I intend to tell the rest. Streets outside the courthouse in Concord, New Hampshire, were silent but not empty. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of a black SUV flanked by 2 lawyers and her longtime aide. Her hair tied back, no makeup, a plain navy coat. There was no political theater today, only clarity and danger. Dozens of plainclothes federal agents loitered nearby. The media, strangely, had been kept blocks away, pushed behind a perimeter, under the excuse of public safety. Even Kristen Welker hadn't been allowed past security lines. Inside, the judge had already been briefed. The hearing wasn't truly about charges. It was about precedent. Power needed to be shown. Message needed to be sent. But Karoline had another message planned as she entered the courtroom. A small earpiece buzzed in her coat collar. Kristen's voice: "We're live." NOVA 24 picked up the satellite feed. "We're running it through a dozen backdoor servers. You're being watched. Say it." Karoline didn't respond. She sat quietly beside her lawyers as Judge Monaghan read the charges. Unlawful dissemination of classified national security material. Violation of the Strategic Communications Integrity Act. That was new. Karoline raised her head slightly. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Monaghan hesitated, then nodded once. Karoline stood, calm, composed, eyes fixed on the back wall. Freshy knew the courtroom security camera was streaming to a world now glued to every word. "I understand the charges against me. Understand what this is. Not a trial, a warning. To every journalist, every citizen, every voice that challenges the machinery built to keep you passive." She paused. "I do not deny what I released. I stand by every document, every word. Because it is not a crime to speak the truth. It is not treason to show the people what's been done in their name without their consent." Judge Monaghan cut in. "Ms. Leavitt, this is not a political stage." She didn't stop. "There is a program. It's called Echo. It is real. It manipulated domestic media in 2020. It tagged journalists based on predictive behavior. And it erased dissent before it reached your ears." Gasps, even from federal agents. Kristen's voice crackled in Jalali's earpiece back in Milan. "They're not cutting the feed." He replied, "Because it's too late now." She just detonated it. Across the world, screens filled with Karoline's face. From a corner cafe in Berlin to a Nairobi newsroom to an internet cafe in Jakarta, people watched as one woman shattered the manufactured quiet. Kristen stood in a makeshift studio beside her new Conca from Nova 24. She barely blinked as the control room whispered in her ear, "We've just passed 68 million live viewers. They're calling it the first global court leak." And still Karoline spoke. "I am not your enemy. I was raised inside this system. I believed it worked. But when I found the file, when I read the part about the descent map how they predicted, who would resist and targeted them preemptively, I knew I couldn't stay silent. She turned to the federal prosecutor. Ask yourself, if the system can predict who will become a threat based on thinking patterns and then preemptively silence them, are we even still free? In D.C., Neil Garland watched the feed in silence. Beside him, General Huxley asked, "Should we cut it?" Garland shook his head. "Cutting it now proves everything she's saying. Let it play. We pivot." "How?" Garland smiled, cold and practiced. "Blame it on the algorithm." In real time, the administration released a statement through back-channel. Media allies. The Echo Protocol was an experimental AI-driven media analysis tool, misused by rogue actors. We condemn its excesses. We support full transparency moving forward. Jalali scoffed as he read it. Rogue actors. That's the reset line. Kristen leaned forward. They're going to isolate Garland, paint him as the villain, say the system is fixed. It's not. No. Jalali said, it's learning, rewriting its camouflage. Back in court, the judge called a recess. Karoline's words had entered public record. The DOJ couldn't walk it back. If they tried to silence her now, it would be seen as confirmation of everything she'd said. The skyline glowed with floodlights and drones. Protesters circled the Capitol, no longer asking for answers, demanding accountability. The leak was complete. Every file, every memo. Every clipped security cam video and redacted name had now been decrypted, organized, and shared through a decentralized platform known only as Torch. The government's response was fast, brutal. Overnight, Torch was declared a foreign influence operation. Its servers were seized, DNS entries blackholed. But mere sites popped up by the second. By the time the State Department held its emergency press conference, the damage had already metastasized across the globe. Truth, once leaked, is not water. It's fire. Inside the Nova 2 for Safe House Studio. Kristen Welker stared at the camera. She looked different now. Paler, older, but sharper. This is not journalism anymore, she said. This is survival. Her co-anchor, a former BBC war correspondent, named Lena Mishra, nodded solemnly. The final file uploaded to Torch Echo-Terminus.pdf contains the full structure of the U.S. Media Integrity Coordination Cell, Lena said. It proves direct collusion between elements of the NSA, FCC, and over 14 private media outlets. Not just to influence stories, but to pre-approve them. Kristen continued, at least 3 Pulitzer-winning journalists appear on the descent. Maps red tier. One of them died in a car crash 3 years ago. Another vanished in Syria. A third was institutionalized. She looked straight into the lens. This is no longer a political story. This is a human rights crisis, and it started here. In this city, with this system, in a secure underground command center just blocks from the White House, Neil Garland stared at a different screen, a live feed of Karoline Leavitt being driven to a protected location under U.S. Marshal escort. He no longer had control of the media, but he still had control of time. We stall it, he said into the mic. We create chaos, foreign tension. We shift attention. Now an aide leaned in. Sir, the NATO channel's requesting clarification. Russia has escalated over the Echo files. Garland smiled grimly. Good, let them. Kristen got the alert seconds later. A NATO advisory had gone live in light of U.S. intelligence leak. Russian Federation activates Gray Doctrine contingency. Expect cyber escalations. Global instability likely. Jalali burst into the room breathless. They're going to start a war. Kristen blinked. To bury the story, he nodded. Not even to bury it, to outgrow it. If the world burns, the files won't matter. Elsewhere, Karoline stood in the window of a safe house in Vermont, looking at the dark treetops. She was on the phone with her father, a retired police officer. A simple man who'd never asked for this. They'll come for you again, he said. This doesn't end here. Caroline's voice was quiet but firm. It shouldn't. Oh, she hung up and turned back toward a small monitor where a message blinked. Live request MaxVox Torch Live. She hit accept dot within seconds. 10 million people were watching. She didn't give a speech. She simply said the Echo protocol was only step one. There's more, there's always more. And I'm not the only one holding it. 3 hours later, 6 more whistleblowers came forward. One from Canada, one from India, one from the UK, a systems analyst from Germany, a linguist from Australia, a coder from Brazil. They each had fragments, pieces of programs built to predict, nudge, suppress. It's not just media, but public behavior. In short, Echo had siblings. Garland issued his last directive at 2:03 a.m. Enact black pattern. It was a rare classified protocol last used during the Cold War, meant for information wars so large. They couldn't be fought by facts, only by flooding reality itself. Fake whistleblowers appeared. Deepfakes emerged. Doctored versions of Caroline's interview were uploaded. Kristen was accused of faking cancer treatment for sympathy. Jalali was tied falsely too. Foreign intelligence, the system tried to make truth ugly. Ugly, enough that people would look away. But something had changed. People didn't look away anymore. On June 17th, Congress was forced to convene a public oversight tribunal. Dozens of heads of agencies were subpoenaed. Garland was called first. He never showed. His body was found in a black car parked outside Langley. The note in his hand read, "The silence I engineered couldn't drown the signal." At Kristen's final broadcast for Nova 24, she invited Karoline as her guest. Two women who had once nearly destroyed each other on live television now sat in the same frame, not as rivals but as survivors of the same machine. Kristen asked her, "What happens now?" Karoline paused, then looked directly into the lens. "Now," she said, "we teach people how to recognize the silence before it starts." In the end, no revolution came, no flags fell, but something shifted. Newsrooms changed, algorithms changed. Then, people watching stopped trusting by default, and in a world once ruled by whispers, the loudest thing left standing, was the truth.